Welcome to the Intake Podcast. We're your hosts, Carson Miller and Travelle McManus, and this is the podcast where we dive into media shaping our world today.
On today's episode, we are bringing to you our review of Severance Season 2 and the finale that was last Friday night. It was a pretty wild ride, so we're excited to dive in and talk about it, share our thoughts, whether we liked it, didn't like it, and where we think the show might go. We also want to say that the continued feedback has been awesome. We've loved to see people engaged in our outtakes. And then if you haven't, go check out some of our past episodes, specifically last week's episode with Mark, the graphic novel apostle, if you want to learn more about the Silver Surfers. But this week, I'm going to throw it to Travelle to talk about our outtake review.
Yeah, so we are hosting a March Madness bracket, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a really crazy, as you know, madness month of basketball, just a lot of upsets, a lot of different things. But just to give you a rundown of our ranking board right now, at first place is one of my good friends, Gordon, who is a diehard Razorback fan. So he's been having a really good week. I don't know how far he has Arkansas going, but he has been enjoying the ride. So then in second place, we have Johnny Keithenson. Hope I said his last name right, but he's right behind Gordon. And then tied for third is our very own Carson and my sister, Kyla, who joined literally that morning and made her bracket maybe like 45 minutes before we started. And she has been very invested in the games, but also what the price is going to be. And we're going to kind of sprinkle it in, but just so you know, as Carson is starting to become a collector, looking at his background, if you're watching the video, and as you can tell with myself, I maybe have an addiction, but it is going to be a Funko Pop. So what Funko Pop that's going to be announced, but that will be your trophy if you survive the madness.
Man, I'm super excited. Excited to bring other people into the Funko Pop world. I just got my first 3 Funko Pops for my birthday this past week. So I have Spider-Man, Mysterio, and then our good friend Neil from Star Wars Skeleton Crew back there. So excited to get some other people on the Funko Pop train. Actually, and this is completely off the rails here, but at my job a few years ago, I had 16 semi-loads of Funko Pop toys in the warehouse that I worked at, and had no idea what they were at the time. Distributed a lot of them, but 16 semi-loads of Funko Pop. So
sounds about right.
Close to my heart.
I probably have half of them in my office now. So
yep,
but
specific deliveries to Travelle's house all the time. But anyway, Severance, the finale came out last Friday. We actually had a chance to watch it together with a group of friends, which was a lot of fun. And honestly, probably my favorite viewing experience of the show overall. Season 1, Season 2 was watching it with everybody, hearing everybody's different reactions, different opinions, even after the show, theories. And so we kind of want to dive into that today. And so just a brief overview of kind of the show as a whole. And we kind of want to start doing this where we review some of the, details about the production of the show. So like who the director is. Surprisingly, it's Ben Stiller is a main producer and director for the show. He directed a lot of episodes this season. It's written by Dan Erickson. There's a total number of 10 episodes per season, so there's 10 in season 1, 10 in season 2, and the total runtime for season 2 was 8 hours and 7 minutes. Or 17 minutes, 8 hours and 17 minutes. So that's quite a bit of time devoted to Severance. So Travelle, maybe get us a little bit up to speed on what the finale entailed, kind of where we ended up, and then we'll jump into some of our thoughts.
Yeah, and just gonna go ahead and throw that spoiler tag here. If you're someone who has not watched the finale yet, which props to you for having a lot of self-control, but bookmark this, come back to it. You've been warned. So we begin the episode with a well-executed conversation between Innie and Outie Mark, something that we have never seen done throughout the show. And we are having Outie Mark ask Innie Mark to help him get Gemma out of the Severance floor. And through this conversation, we see a lot of back and forth and ideas around integration. What does that mean? who would have control, while Outie Mark is pretty much asking any Mark to sacrifice himself to save Gemma. And in this really emotional back and forth, we discover that Cold Harbor is actually Gemma's emotions and her memories and her fragments of her mind that is being separated to accomplish Lumen's overall goal, which was a big reveal of the separation of pain. And during this, we realized that in order for us to save Gemma, Mark must sacrifice himself and all of the Innies to take down Lumen, which led to him just for the first time having a choice and deciding that this was something that he could not go through because of his relationship with Helly and the possibility of losing her. But then we go to what is supposed to be the most prominent day for Lumen, the completion of Cold Harbor, where we get a very dramatic scene with Mark S. and Helly sticking to trying to fight against Lumen and their desires, encouraging Mark to finalize his plans, finish Cold Harbor, but also save Gemma and execute on the plan that Outie Mark proposed to him. He did that. We then get some really fun entertainment along the way with a marching band celebration and just a whole bunch of spectacles for Mark S to then escape out of that chaos to go to the southern fort where Gemma is being hostile. And along the way, we get Mr. Drummond, who is doing a goat sacrifice that we still are confused about. And everything that ensues from that leads into just a straight brawl in the hallway, which ended with Mark having a gun at Mr. Drummond, a made-for-TV moment when the transition from Any Mark to Outie Mark happens while holding the gun. Outie Mark does not even realize it and shoots Mr. Drummond in the neck. And just like Carson said, a lot of emotions, a lot of things were just being screamed at my house as we were watching this on television. But Mark is successful in getting Gemma out of that floor and then going back to the southern floor where they go to being Miss Casey and Any Mark and navigating out to the exit hallway where Mark S gets Gemma out and she goes back from being Miss Casey to Gemma. And now, for the first time, really having the choice of the life that he wants to live. And on one side stood Gemma, his Audie's wife. And on the other side stood Helly, the woman that he's fallen in love with. And in the most dramatic 10 minutes of my life, Mark chooses Helly. And then we cut. And that was your season finale of Severance season 2. So a lot in one episode.
A lot happened. You did a great job summarizing it. There's no shot I could have done that. You talked about things that I had completely forgotten about, actually, and but I remember all those moments in the living room with about 10 people watching the show, and it was more intense there. Because one of the things that I will say about this season is that I don't feel like I was as invested this season in some of the emotional stuff, but having a group of people to watch it with definitely increased the intensity of it. Or raised my awareness of the intensity of it. I'm not sure my heart was not racing. You checked your Apple Watch at one point and your heart.
I was about to say, I was like, do you remember I showed you my Apple Watch? Like my heart rate was just, and I think it was the same thing. Like I don't usually get that like angsty from a movie, but it was just the fact that it was like other people are around. Like, what are they thinking? Like, how are they feeling at this moment? Like, I forgot how much Bailey and I talk during the show. And so not having her to like process and kind of talk through these slow moments, us all trying to be quiet to respect everybody's, like we're watching in the theaters, it's like, it just made it even more, those like really emotional, drawn out moments, more like anxiety driven. And now, I mean, that was fun. Like I enjoyed, like they made it more enjoyable because you were more open to like take in what they were trying to make you feel, opposed to me and Bailey talking through all of these sequences that we normally would talk through.
Right. Yeah, I'm not much of a talker during most TV shows. I mean, if it's a reality show where,
Mm-hmm.
there's games being played and all that sort of stuff, I'm more open to talking. And in a show like this, I typically am like locked in, not a lot
Yeah.
going on. So this was about 30 times more talking than I'm typically used to in watching a show like this. But what I really appreciated about the episode was really that beginning scene where any Mark and
Yes.
outie Mark are essentially passing back and forth a camcorder, recording messages to each other. And you really get to see the first time an any and an outie get to communicate in real time. Every once in a
Yeah.
while, there's a note passed or a little message, or, Lumen facilitated something. But this is the first time they got to fully communicate. And you see some of I don't the difficulty of having that
Mm-hmm.
inner work personality and that outer life personality and different
Yes.
thoughts and desires in the same body. And that was very interesting to see that part of it play out and not come to a resolution. Like there wasn't a
Yeah.
compromise that was made. It was we weren't sure what any Mark was going to do when he got to work the next day.
And we never saw, and we just kind of always assumed that these two were playing on the same team. Like they were
Mm,
just always kind of in sync. The goal of saving Gemma was one that they both had kind of devoted themselves to. But
hmm
once any more kind of understood like the risk of that and the outcome of what that was going to look like, and really questioning his existence, which is something that we haven't really seen him do.
hmm
I think it caught all of us off guard by how he responded to it, because it wasn't, I thought this was going to be, oh, they're going to become pals, this is going to be a really sweet moment. No, very
No,
much the opposite, very much so.
right,
And just the way that they had the conversation, the way they executed on the conversation with the camcorder, the shots, the back and forth, it was just
right.
really really well done. And
It
so,
was
but yeah.
really well done, and there was a lack of trust there. Like
Hmm.
they've never met before. And so you really had to take yourself out of I'm watching the same actor portray this character in two different ways. And you had to take yourself to no, these are two different people meeting for
Yeah.
the first time. And would you trust what this other person was saying? And mine, I mean,
Hmm.
that I was like, no, I don't trust either of them. If I'm in either person's shoes, I don't trust the other person. If I'm outie Mark, I don't trust any Mark to do what he says he's going to do. And if I'm any Mark, I
Hmm.
don't trust that outer Mark has my best interests at heart. Like
Yeah.
there's no trust there.
Yeah, and you see a lot of like almost child talk with the outing mark and how he communicated with the innie mark
Hmm
of, and that
Right.
kind of just been like the running theme that these innies are, kid like people that we just kind of, created and kind of have ownership over. And I
Mm,
mean, outing mark is not wrong in that logic of, like you're created out of my desire to want to be
hmm
severed, but now you're asking this new person that you've created to do something that is really difficult for them to do, and giving them that choice. It's like, it's not, like that back and forth of it, that was really
hmm
interesting to see play out. And when he got Helly's name wrong, you really saw it kind of hit the window, because I could see any Mark feel not validated in his
hmm
circumstances and how he feels.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was a turning point.
Yeah.
Just mispronouncing somebody's name in real life can be a turning point in a relationship that's just starting. And they used that very effectively. It was a very effective use of that interaction. And I think that part of what changes when they get to work that day is Helly is there. And she is able to not only present to any Mark what he most desires, which is to be with her, but also presents a no, we are still fighting against Lumen to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And he's instead of making the choice of am I going to save Gemma or not, it is am I going to fight against Lumen or not? And she kind of changes any Mark's perspective on that. And
Mm-hmm.
she has a really interesting interaction with the CEO
That's right.
inheritor of the company in a previous episode, in episode 9, where he says
Yeah.
that he sees Kier in her, which Kier is this godlike figure, founder, person of this company. It's very unclear what this religious cult is all about. But one of the things they constantly talk about is that Kier is, instead of like spirituality, it is the um, virtue of industry. That
Yeah.
Kier presents himself in a person by their desire to work hard at something, to build something. And the CEO of the company talks to Helly and says, "I see Kier in you because she is working so hard to bring down the company." But just sees the virtue, not her actual actions. He
Hmm.
just sees the virtue that is coming out of her, which is an industrious, a very hardworking person to take down
Yes.
this company. And so they're playing on a lot of these themes of how one's interactions at work versus at home are coming to life.
Hmm. And then she even, and I think it kind of, because I was wondering what did he mean by that, and she had a
Mm,
pen in her hand. Like I think she was, she had a pen in her hand to defend herself, not knowing who this creepy old man was. And as soon as she like threatened him, that
mhm,
pleased him. So it did seem like there is this desire of strength or like there's a fire in her that
mhm,
he doesn't see in Helly or the Audi of Helly, like his
mhm.
actual. I mean, they're both his daughters technically, which whole nother weird conversation
Whole
that can be
nother weird.
had. But something that he's not seeing in his Audi's daughter. His
Mm,
daughter's Audi, again, is so confusing, and other kids that he say he had birth. So
mhm,
this really puts Helly's character from what felt at times felt like a side character to Mark's accomplishment of Cold Harbor and stories really in a more prominent role in the future because that relationship is now there and it seems like there's going to be some level of protection that now Helly is going to get that
mm,
she definitely did not have in season 1 with
right.
everything that transpired there. So that was a really interesting conversation that I think is going to have a bigger meaning going forward
Mm,
when we look back on it.
right. I think it will too, and I think that influenced some of her decision making throughout this season finale, specifically pushing Mark to continue the fight against Lumen, but also making clear her desire to be with him long term, and for
Hmm.
him to stay any Mark and not become outie Mark. And so they complete Cold Harbor, and I say they because they're working together to complete Cold Harbor through their macro data refinement, which I almost prefer that when that was a mysterious term as opposed to knowing that it was harming Gemma in the end.
I know.
But they complete it, and Mr. Milchick comes out, and he's fighting his own battle with Lumen of
Hmm.
them trying to define who he is and his actions, and him saying, "I am 100% for Lumen, but don't change who I am or the words that I use." Specifically, that's the trigger for him is they want him to use much simpler words. It prefers to use more verbose vernacular and extend out sentences and a whole bunch of different stuff. They're trying to force him into this box of what they want. And so he's fighting his own battle of Lumen versus who he is. And he doesn't have any outie battle that we know of and
Hmm.
seems to be an unsevered person that is still struggling with his work overlords.
Hmm. And there's a lot of context too around that. This is like a specific thing to Milchek as a character, and I
Mm,
definitely think that there's a lot of metaphors, that a lot of symbolism at place with him, with the everything that happened afterwards with the band selection, Milchek's performance. So this idea of him being a black man and a working class black man going off
mhm,
what this show is representing and the box that they are trying to fit him in, and that feeling of being treated with no respect, which we saw in earlier episode before, and how he finally responded to that. This feeling of just being pushed around, kind of not he's not respected by his coworkers, and he's not respected by Lumen, and he's also not respected by the team that works under him. And so he really is fighting this battle and trying to
mm,
find his level of his level of belonging within the system, within this company that he has really worked more than anyone else we've seen in the show
Hmm.
to accomplish Cole Harbor, to accomplish the goal of Lumen and everything that they've kind of put in place.
Right. Yeah, he is the person who seems to work the hardest there, that is doing everything he can to meet their expectations. And they never seem to recognize it. And
Yeah,
it's a hard place to be in. So his decisions become a lot more exaggerated in some of the choices that he decides to make in continuing to serve Lumen through the end, from what we can tell.
yeah.
And I'm interested to see where his character goes and how he takes some of the where they take some of those themes with him moving forward into season 3. Because he spent
Hmm.
most of the season finale in a bathroom behind a vending machine,
Yeah.
which is a weird statement.
Is a weird statement,
But
but very
uh,
on brand for the Lumen work experience. It
yes,
seems.
stuck in a bathroom
So
behind a vending machine while a marching band plays and somebody is trying to escape the facility. It's all a
and
whole big thing.
and then there was one thing right before we really got into like the completion of Cole Harbor 2 and before Milchek
Mm,
made that appearance to kind of celebrate was a short interaction with Dylan, who in the previous
mm,
episode, after his Audi's wife had said that she no longer wanted to visit him at work because of the complex relationship it was
mm,
brewing between his Annie and his Audi and her, having a relationship with both of them. That really got to him and he had asked to quit. He, put in a resignation. And
yeah.
so not on the same level that we saw with Annie and Audi Mart, but we kind of got that exact same conversation with Dylan's Annie and Audi, where Dylan Annie writes him a letter, kind
Mm,
of. So, Dylan's Audi writes him a letter speaking to. I would like. It's cool to think that there's some another part of me that my wife still loves and still
mm,
appreciates and still sees as good. Where out here, I don't really have that right now. So
right.
where we saw, and I think that's been a really cool. That was, even though it's definitely like a very very low point of the show,
Hmm.
for this episode, given just the 40 billion other things that happen, I think it's really cool to see that arc for Dylan because in that first season, I think out of all of them, he was the one that was most infatuated with his Audi, the fact
Hmm.
that he knew that he had kids and he knew that more than likely he had a wife and he wanted to learn more about his Audi and thought of his Audi as this cool dude that was probably super great and all these things. And now here we are where he's realizing that not only is that not the case, but now that Audi is looking at him for strength and encouragement and a goal of who he should be as a person. So I really am excited to see where Dylan's character goes from here because I think that was a really important part of the show that obviously, and understandably so, got lost in the sauce.
Yeah, but I think it may almost be the most important commentary on American work culture, is that oftentimes we give the best part of ourselves to our jobs and leave whatever's left over to our families.
Yeah,
And I think that's an important thing to kind of highlight, is we need to be aware of that. And maybe that's what the show is trying to highlight in one aspect. It's highlighting a lot of things. But I think that was one of the main themes that I took away, was we have to be aware that we should give our best to what's most important. And our jobs are important. For most of us, they provide our livelihood and provide food and clothing and house, shelter, and a lot of things that we get to do. The ability to watch television, it provides a lot of those things. So it is
yeah,
important, but what is most important? And
hmm
who is getting the best version of ourselves, I think, is an important thing to think about in our own lives.
yeah.
So that was one of the things that I took away from the season overall, is I feel like they hit that
Mm.
a couple times throughout the season, and it showed itself here in that Dylan scene before all the chaos ensues.
Yeah, because then we get a full on someone for someone who grew up as a drumline kid, been in multiple marching bands. I was having the best, what almost felt like 20 minutes of my life the of the Lumen Marching Band making a entrance to celebrate the accomplishment of Cold Harbor. And just, everyone loves that dance party from season one, and
Mm.
we thought that that was like just a highlighted moment that we would never get again. And not only did we just got like the evolution of that.
Right.
I mean, we got Milchek just going full drum major mode, breaking some moves. My mom was in a band like that, so and I remember watching her perform and just like thinking like this is amazing. Even though
Right.
it's and it, and there's a lot of questions of like, does this really mean anything to the story? Like,
Mm.
what is the meaning behind all of this? Um, I think it was awesome. I think it played, kind of going off that theme. It plays to like the performative nature of work
Mm.
and the way that they celebrate achievements. When, in my eyes, an achievement will be, more money, more
Right.
flexibility with,
Yeah.
being able to be more available for my family, or being able to have more. But no, we're gonna get the pizza party, or we're gonna get, the band, like this band, the pop, the just all these different little simple things that don't really measure up to like what could be beneficial for their workers. And so, and then obviously Milchek being the center of that, performing
Mm.
that, like that element of it, especially after just getting insulted by the Egan robot. That was
Yeah.
also just really weird. Um, and so just really just like, what were you thinking during that? Because I know I was like, I love this, but I don't know, like I'm biased to this because I'm a marching band kid. Like, what were
Yeah.
you thinking when all of this started transpiring?
Uh, to be honest, I wasn't thinking a whole lot. I mean, I was just enjoying it more than anything and more curious. It was obvious that it was there, like from a story plot wise, to be the way that Mark is able to escape the room and get out. Is
Yeah.
you can escape through that chaos. But I made a couple jokes that this is how we should celebrate baptisms at our church from now on. Is uh,
No, we're keeping this.
I thought that it was a great celebration. Yes, it was ridiculous, and the more um, metaphorical elements that you just listed out are far more intriguing. But I was just more enjoying it and saying, "Man, we should celebrate like this more often. We should bring a marching band in for everything,
Yeah.
anything, um, like potty training my son." When he goes to the bathroom for the first time, let's go marching band. Like
Hey,
let's do
I
that.
can be the drummer, so I got you. We can
uh,
start a band.
yeah,
But
just
yeah.
I mean, it was a lot of fun until
Hmm.
it got a little like the marching band started to fade to the background,
Yeah.
and we started to get more of this character development, and the characters were making some hard choices of do we fight, do we run, do we continue to work. There was a few people that just like I'm just going to keep going about my business and
Hmm.
not really participate in anything that's happening, just stay out of the fray. And so Mark goes down this hallway, and Helly starts to fend off Mr. Milchek from chasing after him and allow Mark to get to Gemma. And we do have this weird scene where Mr. Drummond, who's kind of the muscle of Lumen and the show,
Hmm.
where we had met these goat people before. I still don't know what's going on with that.
Yep.
I
Nope.
It's weird. But they were going to sacrifice this goat for some reason.
Yeah.
It ends up with a gun the way that you described, and I think the kind of the most pivotal part of that scene was when the transition from innie to outie happens and the trigger is pulled, where there seems to be this Mr. Drummond was not innocent by any means, but there was
Hmm.
an unintentional killing of somebody just through a transition period for Marcus.
Hmm.
And I think to me it read as just a like reflex to this severed brain being switched back and forth. That there was no intention behind it, but you have the work person who knows what's going on switch to the Audi version, has no idea what's going on and has ended up killing somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that was very shocking that we get to see that interaction of the severed or the innie and outie switch happen. I don't know. What was
Yeah.
your interpretation of that scene?
I thought it was, I mean, and we will get to like our overall feelings of the show, the series, and that. But that was just like probably a top TV moment for me of just how we've seen them go from innie and outie hundreds of times at this point. We've seen them go up and down that elevator, and to see it, this was the first. I mean, we saw it this way, and the way that they just executed on the nature of, he had a gun in his hand. He was in the middle of explaining, hey, I'm about to turn into my Audi and you're going to, and then his Audi comes and just probably just had a like probably
Mm-hmm.
something's in my hand and just
Right.
squeezes his hand. And next thing you know, he shot someone in the neck. And so just the way that they executed on that and the way that it just all just happened, like nobody was expecting that. I was expecting that Drummond was going to be able to like disarm Mark because he knew that he was gonna like not it was gonna take him a second to process where he was at.
Right.
But that is not what happened.
Mm-mm.
And so it was just, and also it was I mean, it was like there was a scene I think in season 1 where the previous hitman had also gotten taken down by the lady who performed the integration process,
Mm.
but we never really saw anything as like gory or any, like we didn't really see people die. So
Mm.
it did seem like it added a level of, I mean, it's kind of hard for Mark to be able to, argue with this in the court of law of like, did he commit murder? Did he not commit murder?
Right.
So it's like, seeing a bloody Mark like that, where we never seen him, this bloody or just beaten up, especially when he's at Lumen, where he's in a suit and tie all the time. And so it really did
Right.
feel like there was a changing of the guard of this story and the direction. Not that I think this is going to be something that's going to be happening a lot in the future, but it just, this episode felt different. Really, like I already had a lot of different beats to it that made it feel like it was something, there were something different, but this was like a really key moment that I was
Right.
like, okay, we're not going back from this.
No, no, there's going to be change that comes from this. There's no, oh, Lumen makes it all okay now. I think
Yeah.
there's going to be real consequences that have played out. From a legal perspective, I think that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about
Mhm.
who's responsible for that. How do you, in a court of law, how would that play out? I mean, there's so many philosophical questions that come out of this idea of severance,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
an innie and an outie. Who's responsible, who's not? How do you punish an innie or an outie for something that the other person didn't do? I mean, all of these things are worth exploring. Um, and most of them aren't exactly happy. So we need a marching band every once in a while to break things up.
Yeah.
But Mark leaves the elevator. Mr. Drummond is there dying, and he races to find Gemma. And we have seen kind of bits and pieces throughout the episode that Cold Harbor is a test of severance. So Gemma is being severed multiple times. 25 times, I think, was the number that they were going for, where
Yeah.
you could, for whatever reason, Lumen thinks that at 25 different any personalities, you can filter out all pain in life. That is their end goal, is that by being severed, you would never have to go to work. You would never have to feel pain, go to the dentist. It seems to be that childbirth can be severed out and you don't have to experience that. And that the Audi person would just live a pain-free life of um, happiness, pleasure, whatever it is, and never have to feel any of the negativity of life. And so
Hmm.
we see Gemma in this room, and we know that in her Audi life, before being severed at all, they had lost a baby due to miscarriage, and that was a very painful thing for her and Mark to go through, like probably the most painful thing in their entire lives. And so there's a crib sitting in this room, and she has to dismantle the crib. And it's a test of, does any of that most traumatic pain of her entire life seep through the severed process?
Hmm.
And she is just calmly taking apart the crib. And Lumen, the CEO of Lumen, the founder, all of the workers that are wanting this seem very happy that this is the way it's going until Mark shows up. So, what
Hmm.
was your kind of take on what was going on with Gemma and what the end result of her testing
Hmm.
was?
It was interesting because there was a lot of theories around, and we could talk about that later, of like theory culture and how it played into this show. But there was a lot of theories of what Cold Harbor or what that final room was going to look like for her.
Mm,
And so the fact that it was just a simple crib and just take it down, a
mm,
simple crib, even though we know the weight of that, and that's not me belittling that at all.
mm,
Because honestly, I think to me, like that's worse than drowning. That's worse
mm,
than, a rock slide because of the context and the fact that she was also wearing the clothes
mm,
that she had found out that she was having a miscarriage in. And
mm,
um, so the weight of that and just kind of, so my train of thought here. And so just, seeing what was going to happen next once
mm,
she kind of completed this, like like this was the final test.
mm,
But we never got to see that final test because very shortly after, Mark comes in. And it was interesting because it was a very suspenseful moment. I think that was when my Apple Watch alerted me
yeah,
that my heart rate was a little too high because I genuinely thought that she might hurt him. I thought
right.
this might turn into a really sad and dark story. Thankfully, that was not the case.
Mm,
But it was just, we're seeing these innies and outies kind of clash with each other. You're having outie Mark have a conversation with any Gemma.
mm-hmm,
And so, whether it was her outies being able to kind of speak through it and kind of help her realize this is someone you should trust, or
mm-hmm,
if it was just the way that he presented himself, which, mind you, he's covered in blood and
right.
has a gun in his hand. I think he might have put it down. I think he put it down at that moment, but
Yeah.
still not a good look. But
Mm-hmm,
yet she chose to follow him while also getting instructions by whatever the voice in the wall is
mm-hmm,
to continue to dismantle the crib and to not trust them. And
right.
then we get this really sweet moment once she steps out and she goes back to Audi Gemma and just really sweet embrace between the two. And now
Mm-hmm,
it's time to escape.
right. And they do. And they race back down through her severed floor to any Mark's severed floor. And so we get that switch back where more clashing of Annie and Audi. You have Annie Mark and Miss Casey, who is one of Gemma's severed personalities. And then they have to navigate their way through the where we've spent most of our time in Lumen on the macro data refinement floor or wherever they call it. And they race to the stairwell that we know pretty much from season one that this is a place where you can escape. It seems to be some
Mm-hmm.
sort of fire exit or something that
Yeah.
they probably have to have. And so any Mark convinces Miss Casey to go through the door, and she reverts back to Audi Gemma, and Mark S. Any Mark S. is standing at the door with it closed, making a decision. And this is where I think our group had a lot of um, feelings and
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of shouting at the TV and there was a few differences of opinions of what was playing out. And like you have said before, then Helly comes up at the end of the hallway and you see her in the background. And Mark is standing there looking at Gemma, knowing that his Audi wants him to go with Gemma, but knowing that he is the NE wants to go with Helly. And he does seem to reach this compromise where he fulfills most of what Audi Mark has wanted, which is to help Gemma escape, but
Yeah.
chooses for himself to stay on the severed floor to be with Helly. And so it to me it really did feel like a compromise of the two things.
Yes.
He
Yeah.
didn't he didn't let Gemma die or get hurt by completing Cold Harbor, and but also chose for himself and said, "I have agency as an individual to choose to be with the person that I'm falling in love with in Helly."
Mm-hmm.
And then when they choose that and they start to run away, Helly smirks, and that's probably the
Yeah,
weirdest part of the whole episode. Whole
it's
episode
very.
is that she smirks, and you're like, "What is that about?" And then it pretty
Mhm.
much ends. We don't get a whole lot after that. Are you Team Helly? Or are you Team Gemma? Because I think this is the new Team Edward versus Team Jacob that we had in Twilight. I think this will be the conversation moving forward.
Well,
Is
it
what was that choice?
it's hard because it's not you because yeah, like those that team is like, but is one person that you're
Mm,
choosing for the other two, and that's just not the case here, and
mm,
it's easy. I mean, I think, and so I guess we can go like like there was a pretty split divide of what Mark should do,
right.
and I agree that I would want Mark to go out for Gemma
Mm,
because I mean I look at it from this perspective of we're all outies. Like we are if
hmm
in this Severance world, if we're playing along, we are all outies. So the
Right.
desperation of outie Mark to be
Mm,
with his who he believed to be late wife. I mean it makes me think of Bailey. It makes me think of
mm,
if that was my wife at that door, I would be begging my Annie to just go out that door.
right.
But if and then it was this idea of love passing through transcending through severance.
Mm,
That's fine, but wouldn't that also mean that that could be the counter as well with Helly and
mm,
this Annie only knowing love through the context of his relationship with Helly?
hmm
And so, it was a decision that was rooted in love and not so much logic. But there was also just the addition, like he knows he opens that door, the show might be over. Like that might
Right.
be, and that was kind of one of the conversations that I was thinking of when we were saying, like, yes, he should have walked out the door. But
hmm
if he walked out the door, what would this story then be?
Right.
And we've never had the endings, and I still just love this idea of seeing the innies have agency of their lives that we've never seen them have before,
Mm,
and seeing them carry out on that and seeing what journey that takes them. And I think that that's a more compelling story going forward than if we were saying this was the end of the show, then yeah, go out the door, credits, show's over, 2 seasons. But
right.
we know that's not how this works.
Right.
So yeah, so
They
that was my thoughts.
Yeah, they have confirmed season three, and I agree that is the more interesting story. And I agree that as an outie, I would be wanting my innie to choose Gemma, to choose my wife if I'm putting myself in that scenario. But I also put myself in the innie scenario of not having that trust, not knowing what integration really is. So I'm
Hmm.
not only choosing Helly, I'm choosing my own existence as well,
Yeah.
or the only sure thing that provides me existence. And so there was a part of me that was like, I mean, I was kind of joking around, but I was like, man, I'm Team Helly. He made the right choice. And really just trying to stir up chaos within our group more than anything. But I fully understood both choices. I could
Yeah.
put myself in both situations and
Yeah.
understand the choice that was made either way. And so I think that's what made it so great and what made this episode my favorite episode of the season.
Yeah.
So to kind of look at the season as a whole, to me, this was a downgrade from season one. I am
Ooh.
fully convinced this was a bridge season. It was a very important bridge season and a good bridge season, but I think it was a bridge season to the Ennies having full agency and for whatever this Lumen cult type thing is that I think they're going to start heading more into to be a more prominent storyline. And so overall, I still liked the season. This was by far the best episode to me, the one I was most invested in, and the one that I thought brought the most thought provoking parts of the show that I enjoyed from season one, where we got some of that workplace commentary, we got a lot of cultural commentary, we got choices and hard themes being brought up throughout the whole thing instead of just getting story progression. Because I feel like for part of
Mhm.
season two, we just got story progression. We didn't necessarily get a lot of the more interesting workplace dynamic elements, which I enjoyed so much from season one. So
Yeah.
overall, I think I liked season 2, but preferred season 1, although this was the pinnacle of it. What were your thoughts on the
Yeah,
season?
I can get behind it because I'm trying to remember season. The moments I think season one overall just had a more consistent story that like a story that I consistently enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed every element of the innie and the outie and, learning about Lumen, learning about just like the little work quirks and just like it was just a really fun ride and it was a very consistent fun
Mm-hmm.
ride. Where this one, it felt more like a roller coaster where there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ups, there was a lot of downs. I think the highs were just really high and they were just really well executed,
Right.
expanding. And you knew that, like if Lumen is a representation of the cage, you knew that you're gonna have to break the cage eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like they broke the cage in a way that was meaningful, that was
Mm-hmm.
interesting, that was really engaging. There were some moments where it wasn't as engaging as, just learning about Lumen in episode
Right.
one, but it hit on some really hard conversations, bigger than what we expected this show to be, which
Mm.
is always something that I think is just a really cool thing when a show kind of go beyond your expectations of what it's trying to accomplish and what conversations
Right.
it's trying to stir up, and the storytelling and that aspect of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I do, and it's probably biased. I wouldn't put it number one, but I would say like the season finale was probably like top five
Mm.
television for me. And it might be
Wow.
because of the experience of, having
Yeah.
friends, that whole dynamic, but just from the cinematography, from, moments that only a show like Severance could execute on, where
Right.
you need to have the full weight of what is happening from episode one of season
Mm-hmm.
one to episode 10 of season two,
Right.
having all of that carry into this one episode in a way so well done, so well executed. Um, I just, I think it will be one that we will look back on and think this was probably one of the best moments of television. Now, I
Mm.
wouldn't say it's number one. I could definitely put some other TV show episodes above that, but it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely in that conversation. As this show has seemed to be kind of slowly rising to that conversation based
Right.
on what people are saying right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. It was great television. I don't know if it makes the top 5 of TV moments for me.
Mm,
I don't know if I was quite that invested this season, but I think it would be good to kind of give a rating for ourselves, something for us to go off of, maybe to base other reviews off of as we go through Daredevil, kind of see how we feel about these different shows. So for me, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to rate just season 2 of Severance, not the whole show. I think the whole show would probably
mhm.
be a little bit higher for me. And before I forget, the one thing that I missed most about season 2 was we didn't get as much Rickon, which is Mark S's brother-in-law in the Audi world, who provides a fair amount of comic relief and some commentary on self-help and all of kind of those themes. I desperately missed him in season 2. He brought some levity to a show that deals with some heavy, heavy themes and heavy topics. So I hope we get more of him in season 3. But I
I would say
desperately
Irvin
missed
for
him.
Irvin for me. I mean, and it's
Mm,
funny because I could not. I was not an Irvin stan. My wife was. My wife was a day one. She loved Irvin from the jump. I thought he was obnoxious. I thought he was obnoxious until he became rebellious.
mm,
Like, and it's obvious because I mean, he played a role. He represented, that culture, that every company's favorite worker that
mm-hmm,
just kisses the ring and does, takes in all those culture things and like
mm,
wears it with pride.
right.
But yes, I wish that he had played more of a role at the
Mm,
end of it,
yeah.
just because he I think his arc was just so expansive from where he started to where he finished,
Mm,
or where we last saw him. And I think he would have maybe added a little bit more to
right.
these final few episodes. So I'm hoping, I mean, everyone's praying that this is not, and I doubt this is the end of his story.
Mm,
But yeah, that would be my criticism
mm,
with characters I was missing out on. Rickon,
Right.
I thought Rickon was it was funny, but he's just such an unserious character. I was just like, and it is interesting because it seems like he was going to be playing more of a role with,
Right.
him getting involved with Lumen, and then we hear nothing.
We hear
And
nothing.
I
Like
was
it
like,
just
how valuable is his book going to be?
right.
How valuable is he going to be with Lumen, like in chaos right now? And so,
Right. Yeah, so I hope we get more of him because I do feel like his storyline was just completely dropped. And I get it. There was more important things happening. But I feel and even Irving had some levity to him to where we were dealing with some heavy themes, but also his quirkiness brought about just brief moments of lightness and you could breathe for a second and then continue on and be ready for whatever comes next. I feel like this season missed that a little bit. And
yeah.
so for that reason, this season I give a 7.2 out of 10 would be my rating for this season. I'd probably give Severance overall as a show an 8.5. Like I haven't dug into it that much. But just because I enjoyed the first season more, this one comes in at a 7.2 for me. And
So,
I don't want it to come off as like it's getting a C on a like a grade scale. Like 5 is average on my head, where
okay.
5 is, I liked it, or I could take it or leave it. 4 would be negative. 4 and below would be negative. 5 and above is like positive, and so
So
5
go,
is average.
so going behind the scenes of our kind of rule brick that we kind of set for ourselves, what are some of the lower, like what is bringing it down to a 7? What were
Right.
some of the things that you're
Um,
like you're kind of pointing at?
Yeah, so production value is like highest production value. The show
Yeah.
is very well produced. The sets are beautiful. The design is beautiful. The cinematography, the direction, all the lighting choices, all of that is top notch.
Hmm.
Acting, top notch. I believe every single one
Yeah.
of these characters. Even though I'm a huge Parks and Rec fan, I believe that Adam Scott is Mark S. and not Ben from Parks and Rec. Like he is, I
Yeah.
am fully locked in on him. So the acting and direction, production value, all is top notch. The storytelling for season 2, I felt was weaker, so that drops some points there for me. And then just the overall enjoyment of the season, because I didn't have those moments where I felt like I could breathe with some of that levity. My enjoyment was less in this season, and then the emotional impact. My heart rate was not up. I'll just be like, there are shows where my heart rate is up. The only time that like I was out of my seat freaking out was in I think in episode 8 when the reporter person is like drilling into Mark's head to try to do the reintegration.
Yeah.
Like that was terrible. Like my heart was racing. I was freaking out. I like couldn't handle that. I was 100% emotionally invested at that point. But like just sitting there for the season finale, my heart wasn't racing. I was like, okay, whatever happens, happens. I mean, there was some excitement, but I just wasn't quite as locked in emotionally this season.
Hmm.
So those three things, enjoyment, emotional impact, and storytelling, just kind of brought it down a little bit. And again, that 7.2 should not be seen as a bad score. 5 in my head is average. So this is above average. This is a good show, just not a like if you ask me like would I go back and watch season 1 again? I'd probably say yes. Would I go back and watch season 2 again? No, I'd probably watch a YouTube video that sums it up. Is
Okay.
kind of how I feel about this season
Okay.
specifically.
Well, I definitely felt I gave it a 9.2 out of 10.
Okay.
And so, and same thing, production value. Like, if I can give it 11 or 12, if I can give it
Right.
100 out of 10, I would. My guy, as a
Yeah.
videographer, composition, lighting, colors, the way that they, filming techniques, like they changed the way that I think about storytelling
Right.
from a video production standpoint. And so, that, give it a 10. Acting, yes, you're seeing, is as someone who went to go see Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and had to sit and watch two Jim Carreys on stage, I realized that it can get tacky really quick
mm,
when you have someone playing out two characters
mm,
and are trying to present them as two different characters.
right.
And this cast across the board
Mm-hmm.
does it so well, so
Right.
well. And it's such a hard thing to execute on.
Mm,
And so I mean, as someone who has no acting ability, I have nothing but respect for it. And I'm the same as you.
Yeah.
Like, I did watch Parks and Rec. Yeah, like I mean, like Adam Scott, like, I think this is changing how we view him as an actor. I think this
Mhm.
is a career shift for him.
Right.
I've watched a lot of interviews of him lately. He's talked about how this is the genre he wanted to go in,
Mm.
but then he got one gig in Step Brothers and then another gig in this other comedy, and then next thing you know, he's saying crazy stuff on TV and doing all these funny stuff. But I mean, through the genius of Ben Stiller and just everything, they've been able to pull him back to where he wanted to be, and he is just acting his tail off, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of it for me does tie in. I very much resonate with the story that they're trying to tell as someone who has multiple hats,
Mm.
who very much gets sucked into the work life culture, and has struggled to find that balance.
Right.
So this story, the symbolisms and the things that they're trying to tell just hits really
Mm.
high for me, and
Mhm.
I'm just gonna resonate with that and give it that. Enjoyment, emotional impact, those two things kind of go to the same. And the enjoyment, a lot of the enjoyment is that it is a show that me and my wife eagerly, eagerly wanting to watch together. And that
Mhm.
is not very common in the McManus household. And so when that happens, it is a beautiful thing, is a great thing to just have that journey with her, all the conversations we've had, the hours of conversations we've had after an
Mm.
episode, and just that kind of bonding just
Right.
increases that enjoyment, the impact of us, shaking each other and having these moments that shows don't usually really bring out that level of
Right.
energy for both of us at the same time. It's usually one or the other. So we're
Mhm.
both, shaking each other when Irvin is drowning Egan,
Mhm.
yeah, when he's getting the surgery back in his brain, like that
Mhm.
element, just all these different moments that just like would make us look at each other or make us like, just be like, oh my goodness, and like having that together
Mhm.
really special, something I just have to add into that experience.
Right.
So for me, it's like I'm here for it. I'm down for the ride. I I probably would give season one a 10 out of 10
Mm.
because I do think, looking back, I do think I like season one more, but
Mhm.
I put season one on like a top tier. And I think season two is just a step, like a centimeter of a step down from
Yeah.
that. But I also think, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Mm.
Do you think, going into an overall conversation around streaming,
Mhm.
TV shows, because the way we consume TV is just different now, but this kind of still had that, Walking Dead era of television where you
Mm.
would watch it at a certain time on a certain night, or was available to watch at a certain time at a certain night, and most people were watching it at that very moment. Do
Right.
you think, given that there are so many different formats on how to release these shows, that it maybe would have benefit them if they did give us all 10 episodes at one time? Or do you
Mm.
think that this weekly format worked for them?
Well, I think streamers overall are recognizing that for them to have long-term success and have people subscribe over time and continue to pay monthly, they have to do the weekly releases. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you binge it, you drop it. You binge
Yeah.
it, you unsubscribe. Like, you just let it go. This was not, and that was part of like the enjoyment or emotional impact rating for me was that I wasn't anticipating which night I couldn't tell you what night this came out on. I have no
Hmm.
idea. Um, we would, you know this. We would have to catch up on like 2 or 3 episodes to get back
Yeah.
caught up, and maybe that's just the season of life we're in. And because there has been other times where we are like, okay, we are on this and we are watching this every single week, keeping up with the weekly release schedule. This just wasn't one of those, and so I think it benefits somewhat from it. I like when they do like the first 2 episode drop and the last 2 episode drop at the same time because you
Hmm.
can have that tension build over more than just 30 to 50 minutes. For me, sometimes that is hard, and maybe that's why I enjoyed season one more. Was that I think I may have binged it after it all came out, and there
Yeah, I
was
did
that
too.
tension building throughout each episode and the intrigue, and you could remember every detail. Some of this for me is okay. What happened last week? I can't remember. I can't remember from week to week all the details and why there's goat people and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it is successful for the streamers. For us as an audience, I can see why it's good. I can also see why it's bad. For me,
Yeah.
it tends to lessen some of that emotional impact for me because it's not building up over time. I'm not, I'm thinking about it some throughout the week, just not as much as maybe others. And it wasn't, when I talk about the emotional impact, for me, the harder moments hit harder when I have that moment to breathe. And there was a lot in this season that was just like heavy thing after heavy thing after heavy thing. And you get me down enough and depressed enough in some of these things that eventually you go a little, for me, I got a little bit numb of like, oh, this is another sad thing that they're showing me. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is another sad thing that they're showing me. If you don't bring me back up to some sort of equilibrium, I'm not as emotionally invested because you've just punched me in the gut multiple times. And so, because I don't want it to come off as there was a lot of hard things and a lot of important things to talk about, and they were
Mm-hmm.
emotionally impactful. For me, I just wasn't able to invest because I didn't have time to breathe when I
I
was
get that.
invested.
I
Does
know. I
that make
know.
sense?
Yeah, no, I know. It's fine. I know we've said that we're gonna stop agreeing with each other more when we don't agree, but I do agree with this. I am being honest when I say I do get that because I do think there is a limit for everybody. I mean, you and I are both not horror movie people for like almost that exact reason that we just
Mm,
there just needs to be a limit. And I think since this wasn't something that was violent and those low moments for me made me stop and think
mm,
about myself and not
mm-hmm.
so much the sadness of the like I guess I took it more so just like to relate to myself more than so the sadness of the moment. It just kind of hit differently, but
Yeah.
I do see that where the first one was a little bit more balanced
Mm,
and giving you things but pulling you back up, giving you
right.
things and kind of pulling you back up. Like and this one it was like we're gonna bring you down. Like we're taking the training wheels off. We're
Right.
gonna start just punching you left and right and making you really think hard about these. And I think that it's interesting because I know like I'm trying to be better about not being on social media, but there's just been a lot of really good shows which has spurred up a lot of good conversations. And I do wonder how this one of the things that I saw with this show, and especially once we got up to like the season finale, is that there was a lot of theory culture in place
Mm,
where a lot of people were, having their different theories and kind of going off, things that they've seen, people going frame by frame. And it slowly became week by week, people having all like a list of theories
mm,
and then comparing what's happening to those theories and then having a reaction based on those theories
mm,
instead of just listening to the story that was actually trying to be told.
right.
And having a whole week for people to have these conversations to kind of theorize these things, I think is kind of a double-edged sword because I think, like you said, it's kind of both. It
Mm-hmm.
helped the show because it built it like all week people are, you know, like that's all they're thinking about is all they're talking about. That's like that very much was the culture online around Severance.
Mm.
I saw a meme where it's like people don't even say hi anymore. They say, "Have you watched the last episode of Severance?" Um, and so I think it helped, but I do think that a lot of people started turning sour in these last few episodes when things were taking a direction that their theories were not leading them. Like Devin
Right.
being because Devin had an android, which all of them had androids. Because she had an android, she must have been a villain, or she was, someone to be suspicious of. And it's like that doesn't fit the theme of the show. Like, why would a sister who has been the one thing that's been grounding Mark turn out to
Right.
be a villain all because a TikToker saw her use the android and was like, hear me out. She's a villain. And so I think been it would have been good if maybe everyone had it and just watched it through and
Mm-hmm.
not have to play all of these theory games because we didn't like I watched it all in season one. Didn't really have time to do that because
Right.
we binged it in like 2 days.
Wow.
Um, so I am curious. I mean, they're going to do the weekly, like you said, like profit wise,
Hmm.
media attention wise, stay in front of the conversation. Like it does just make a lot of sense for it to be weekly. But I do wonder if someone like you, others that maybe would put this in like the 7 to 8 category, like would it benefit their watching experience if they waited until the whole season
Mm.
was over? And I know that was something that you were going. I kind of guilt tripped you into not doing that for the sake of the podcast, but I know that that was something that you were going to do, that you were kind of looking at, and I now
Yeah.
look back and think that was not a bad idea. Now I feel extremely guilty.
Yeah.
This
No,
probably would have been
don't
a better.
don't feel guilty about it. There's a cost of doing business here where I have to let go of some of my preferences, such as my wife and I tend to let a show build up to 5 or 6 episodes of being released before we start it and kind
Hmm.
of catch up, and then it kind of leads us into the last episode where we only had to wait for a week, like once, maybe twice, for an episode to come out and allow
Hmm.
us to have a little bit of that binge feeling along with some of the anticipating and theory thing. We don't. I I don't know if I saw a single theory. I'm not online in that way a whole lot. I didn't spend a lot of time looking into theories, mainly because I want to experience what the show has to offer, not what somebody
Yes.
on the internet thinks. Now, if I have a real question, I do this for like the Marvel movies, or I do this where there seems to be some source material to pull from. Severance
Hmm.
seems to be wholly original, and there's
Yeah.
nothing to pull from. There's nothing that I'm missing as an audience member. All I can do is take in what they give me and experience it.
Yeah.
And
No.
based on that experience, I think we're going to start asking this question at the end of each review of, was it worth your time? And for me, Severance is worth my time. You may think that my rating of 7.2 is too low. To me, that seems like a good rating. I think that's a great rating for a show. And it is worth my time because of the thought provoking nature of it, because of a lot of the themes that they touch on. It has more to offer than just pure entertainment, which is becoming more and more rare. There's so much
Hmm.
content out there that we can just take in, or we can just scroll on our phones and not add anything to our life. This did add conversations in our friend circles at work. This added a lot of thought provoking things about work life culture, about marriage, about relationships, about a lot of different things, to where those are the types of shows that I think are worth more of our time. And when I look at the runtime of 8 hours and 17 minutes for this season, to me, that is well spent when it could have been 8 hours. If you look at your screen time on your phone, what apps did you spend 8 hours on just in a week that
Yeah.
may not have been worth your time? So,
Yeah.
was it? Do you feel like it was worth your time?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. With a nine, with a 9 out of 10, absolutely. Because I mean, yeah, same thing. Like it a show to bring out like meaningful conversation is kind of really hard to do, especially in this
Mm.
media age and like with the content that we are getting now. It's just a lot of just not, I don't want to say trash, 'cause I feel like that's an old man's term at this point, but just a lot of meaningful-less content. I will say
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
And so for this to be entertaining and yet thought-provoking, that's really the perfect sauce for me. That's always going to win me over.
Hmm.
And then also just like I said earlier, like being able to enjoy that with my wife and have
Yeah.
those conversations with her, with friends, um, and just and also like I said, like from as a videographer standpoint, just getting new
Mm.
inspiration, because
Mm.
that's really TV is really has not been the medium where I go to get that kind of inspiration. It is more YouTubers and
Hmm.
small, short films. Like that's where I go to get my
Right.
inspiration. But this change, and I hope that this change how cinematographers think
Mm.
about composition and the impact that they can have on a story, because I
Mm.
really do think that it was a team, Ben Stiller, um and that team that he assembled to
Mm.
really tell a compelling story that was beyond just the
Mm.
characters and the acting and the set designs and things like that. It was, the framing and lumen and the shots and just all of it. It was just
Mm.
I loved it. I think it was amazing. I think it was well executed. So yes, 8 hours. That's a work shift more, and so definitely worth my time. And so ready for season 3. And so I know I'm like, oof, another conspiracy. And so
awesome. Well, that kind of wraps up our Severance season 2. Maybe before season 3 comes out, I think it's supposed to come out quicker. Hopefully, we don't have to wait 3 years.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Maybe we'll do some theory culture, throw out some theories next year before the season comes out, and continue talking about Severance. But next week is going to be our mid-season Daredevil Born Again review. Tuesday night, they are dropping 2 episodes mid-season. And so for me, I'm going to have 3 episodes to catch up on because I didn't watch last week's. Surprise, surprise. Travelle, you probably just have 2 to watch.
I have 2.
But we will bring kind of our thoughts on where the season is at, how it's progressed, what we think about it, and theories heading towards the finale for Daredevil Born Again. So far, it has been fantastic and have really enjoyed it. So until next time, consume wisely and stay thoughtful.
Thank you for tuning in to the Intake Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe, rate, and share with your friends. You can watch all of our video podcasts on YouTube at youtube.com/theintake. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at The Intake Pod, and share your own intake experience with us via email at intakepod@gmail.com. This podcast is produced by us, Travelle McManus and Carson Miller.